So welcome, teachers, parents, educators, artists. I'm Gail Lescher. I come from a school in California. I took 2 classes through there. My background is in the arts. My bachelor's degree is in printmaking, fine arts, with a minor in art history. I kind of came in through the back door into Waldorf education. I had 3 young girls. My husband went through teacher training. He became a class teacher. I started doing his chalkboard drawings because he was not artistically inclined, as well as other things in the classroom. By the time my daughters were in the lower grades, I was asked to come in and take a class. So I felt a very strong natural inclination towards Waldorf education and seemed to have some inner grasp of how to approach the arts and music and so forth. So I became a Waldorf teacher. And when I first started doing chalkboard drawings, I found that I would go in on the weekend. This is when I was still doing my husband's. This is even before mine. And I would take 4 or 5 hours standing in front of his chalkboard. And I realized this is an insane amount of time, but I realized that I, as well as many other teachers at the school, were doing the same thing. So I thought, well, there's got to be a different way of doing this. We can't spend half of a day of our precious weekend at the school yet again. So I hope one of the things that I'd like to get out of today is to just walk you through working more quickly, hopefully with more confidence, and we'll see where we go from there. So why do we put drawings on our boards? Anyone?
Creates an atmosphere for the children. They come right in and they're in that world all the time.
Okay, so they're in a world. So the drawing is right off the bat, hopefully going to connect them. And Waldorf is all about connecting them to something, always connecting them to something in the bigger world, within themselves, what have you. So the drawing on the board represents something of either the curriculum or what's going on in nature outside, or a festival that just occurred, or something. So the drawing is that manifestation of, here's a way for you to connect with the world right now. And because we have a range of grades, the drawings hopefully will evolve as the children evolve through the grades. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. So if it's fall, a seasonal fall picture on the board, or a Michaelmas picture on the board, or maybe they've gone on a field trip to a pumpkin farm and they've brought back pumpkins. So it can be drawing from their own experience, something that they've done in class, and you've just portrayed a picture of it. Or it could be, this is what we're looking forward to in the season that's coming up ahead of us. Or this is a story that you've just heard in class, and now you're going to get washed over with this image from the story for days or weeks to come. Okay? So those seem to be the main reasons why we would put a drawing on the board. The other one is that the boards are black, and they're ugly to look at. Just this gray, black, smudgy, erased board. So it's nice to have at least some color there for them to look at during the course of the day, just to rest their eyes on that image. How often do you put a drawing on the board? I've heard, well, every 6 months. To, oh, I change mine every 3 days, and everything in between. So how often you change your drawing is going to depend on how much time you have, how comfortable you are with drawing on the chalkboard, how comfortable you are with your artistic skills, how inspired you are to put up a new drawing, how inspired you are just of taking the time, but also of, oh, what image do I really want to bathe them in for this coming week or weeks? I try to change my drawing at least, there would be a drawing per block. If not, my goal was always a drawing per week. I would change the drawing. And I got to where I refused to come in on the weekend, and the time that I would do it was, I know it's hard to say this, but after school on Friday. I usually would clean my classroom, and it was a wonderful time for me to do a rook show of the whole week. And really, you know, I'm picking up something that goes in this person's desk, and so then I'm thinking about that student, and so it was just kind of a nice closure time for me. And then it would require me to plan in advance, what am I teaching next week, and what image do I want to have to go along with that on the board. And I would usually then stay and do a drawing on Friday afternoon. And I might not finish it, and I might finish it Monday morning early before the students arrive. That, for me, was the healthiest thing. And I suggest that you find for you what works best, because it has to work for you. Otherwise, you'll be the teacher that has the same drawing on the board for 6 months. Changes in age. So, Brett, you have two wonderful examples of an early grades drawings on the board. They're relatively soft images. The colors are softer, leaning into the pastels. There's not a lot of detail. There's room for imagination. And so a nice snapshot right here. And then as you go through the grades and you have the extra challenge here, those of you who are teaching, of dealing with 2 grades always at one time. So that's for you to figure out how far you want to push the envelope in your advancing imagery. But then as you go up through the grades, you're going to be working into more detail, more accuracy, because ultimately the students are looking at your drawings and they are the models for their striving. So the drawing on the board is a little inkling reminder in their minds of, oh, that's where I could go with my artistry if I give myself that chance. So as you go up through the grades, by the time you're in 5th grade, well, you're going to want that iris that you draw on the board to be botanically accurate. You're going to want in 7th grade to show a bridge in proper perspective. So you always want to kind of be thinking about what's being taught in this year, and where is the development of the child at this time, and how do I want to match those, dovetail those together? Okay? Does that all make sense? Yeah? Okay. The other thing, normally in a class like this, we would do some color circles and different things, but I want us to draw as much as possible. So the one thing that I'll say before beginning to draw, and I find that this is, for me, the most appealing aspect, or one of the most appealing aspects of the drawings, is layering colors. So in any situation, just like with the students who have their crayons, how are they in the early grades? Brett, how many colors do the students have?
We have about 10.
10, okay. So, but obviously that 10 does not equate the whole spectrum of colors. You have many colors that fall in between all of those colors. So one of the things that I try and do early on and then continue to work through, because not only are you showing them all of these images, But you're also, the flip side of all of that is, you're working from some level of, I am an artist. So there's always, for me, that artistic part of how do I want to show them the artistry, the love of color, the love of intermingled blues on top of greens and yellows will wash into them. And so they're learning about artistry also as they see these things. And sometime you may, and I'll use one as an example later, have a drawing on the board that they'll put in their books. Some of the drawings will eventually go in their main lesson books, or they might become a painting that they do in a painting class. So that option is always there. So I'm always thinking about layering colors, and I taught that with my class in first grade when they were doing crayon drawings, and I stayed with it all the way through because I find that an image is much more beautiful, much more interesting to look at when you have things layered on top of other things. Okay, so I think we can fit 4 here and 6 here, and I'm going to be the monkey in the middle. And then there's black paper here, and there's chalk here. So if you would all, as quickly and quietly as possible, come over here and kind of work in 3s. I think if we break each chalk into 3 parts, and they don't have to be exactly the same size, but hopefully pretty close to 1/3, and then just get one of each color and go to the board. So I'll just start breaking chalk and putting it. Does everybody have chalk? Okay, go ahead and set them on the ledge so you've got free hands. So I'm going to kind of march up through the grades, and I am going to work quickly. And that's kind of the key to this, is not to belabor a drawing. I once did a drawing of, I went into your room and looked at your chainmail. I drew Thor once in chainmail on the chalkboard, and I had drawn all the teeny tiny little, it was over the top, it was ridiculous. Yeah, but you love it. Well, I did, but you know, but when you're deep in, it's sometimes you have to balance. This is taking too much. I need time to go home and do the wash and spend time with my family and. Okay, so we are going to be using, and this probably will not come as a surprise to any of you, the sides of the chalk for most of our drawing. So this is going to be a first grade drawing, and in first grade, and oftentimes, as I went up through the grades, I didn't put it in a box. I would just kind of float it. So let's just, would you help me for a minute, Jared? I want to move this up 1 notch. If I take this off, will you put the pegs up 1 more? Thank you. All right. So you all kind of have a defined space there. So with the side of your chalk, just lightly, we're going to make an oval. And the edges can be soft. So there doesn't have to be any distinct hard edge on the outside. Okay, and within that, and I'll try as much as I can to stand off to the side so you can see what I'm doing. So this drawing, we're going to, it's going to be an image of a couple little children, kind of a Hansel and Gretel kind of image, walking through a forest. They're walking towards the light, and there's going to be trees rising up kind of on either side of them. And they're going to be very dwarfed by these trees. So this is really them in this much larger world where they're quite vulnerable. So coming up from one side, we're going to come up with a tree trunk, and it can branch and branch and branch out. So basically, what we're going to do is leave this middle section here. This is kind of sacred ground. So just kind of stay outside that egg. And as you go up with your chalk, watch me for just a moment. And this is something they should all learn by 5th, 6th grade. Whatever width their crayon is, let's say they have their Papa Bear crayon, it's this wide, but they can gradually turn it diagonally until they have a very thin line. Okay, so when you're doing tree branches, that's a good place to do this. So if you're starting with something thick, it can be thick, and then rotate your chalk and get the thinness that you want. And then you don't end up with these stubby outer branches. So you've got one tree, give it some branches. You can have a branch go right up in, kind of tangle into your outer edge. And then on the other side, another tree, kind of leaning in. Branches coming up. The branches can intermingle in the middle. You'll get a lovely arch. Okay, and already I want to start layering colors. So I've got right now red-violet trees. Oh well, I'm going to put some blue over them, or blue-purple, something. If you've got a blue-violet or a purple, something in that, you can take that and bring it right back into this outer circle. So whatever you started with in your outer circle, you're going to now add a second color. And this is something that I would do more in the lower grades than in the upper grades. Put in this kind of soft, lovely, colorful frame around a piece. And once you've kind of doubled up on your outer frame, bring your new color right up into these branches. And just like a nice lazured painted wall, you want to leave some of the first color exposed. You don't want to just cover it all up with the second color. So have some places where your first color is showing, where they're overlapping, and where just your second color is showing. Does that make sense? Come up into your other tree trunk and send out some more branches.
Only tree on top of the first tree.
Yes, I'm layering.
But I mean, you put the branches from the darker purples.
I did. In some cases, yes. In some cases, I started new branches. Now, one of the things about chalkboard drawing is the question is always, what order do I put things down in? Do I start with the background and work my way forward? Do I put my foreground in and then color in around it? Brett's tree over here, I think you can clearly see, he did the tree first, yes? Mm-hmm. And then he came in with color around it, and then if you want that, then you get that lovely kind of roughish, charcoaly black line around your image. It's a wonderful tool to use if that's the image you want. If you want it to be softer, then you would do your background first and come in with your other colors over the top. So there's two different ways you can spin this, okay? So let's, before we get into more color, let's say that our background is going to be, it's going to be some kind of sunset colors. So before we get too much further into our trees, bring in a light color, a yellow, a peach, and again, I'm going to put it right into this border. Keep it nice and soft. And you can start getting a lovely overlap of color there. And then use this yellow and identify the background, which means you're going to have to kind of come into all of these different contours. And this whole middle section, this egg that I kind of reserved for where the children will be. And don't be afraid to overlap. You're going to get some of the most beautiful colors where you overlap. And don't get too finicky because we're going to put leaves on these trees, so don't get too anal about filling in every little nook and cranny. So, would you all just stop for a minute and look at my drawing, and someone, if you know anything about color schemes, do you know what color scheme I've got going on here? Contrasting colors or complementary colors. So if you go back to looking at a color wheel, your yellow is going to be opposite your violet. So this is one way you can either fall into doing this, or you can consciously choose ahead of time, this is the color scheme I want for this drawing. I want it to be more opposites. But you'll see by the time we're done, I'm really sanguine. I end up putting every color in every drawing. So, but right now, that's what we've got. And we could continue to really push that and have it be mostly yellows, golds, and then this nice complement of purples, red, violets. Okay. But it's springtime. It's a warm, late spring day. And so here we go. A green, preferably a dark green. Well, maybe I need to give you a minute. So go ahead and work on getting that yellow into your background.
Any ideas if we started with a different color?
If you start, well, you could make yours fall. So you've got a lot of green already going on, so your foliage could be in the reds, golds, oranges instead. Now, some of you are already starting to smudge with your fingers. That's perfectly fine. I tend to wait a little further into my drawing. It depends on whether I want a grainy feel or I want it to be real velvety when I'm done. So, but I tend to wait, but there's no hard and fast rule about that. Okay, so where the children are going to walk, that should also be this nice warm background color.
Did you say green or something?
We're about to do green. Yeah, we are about to. Okay, so let's go on. Again, using the side of my chalk, I'm going to start dancing around the periphery of the tree. and placing very ambiguous, not well defined clusters of leaves. And even though we can assume there are some branches coming out towards us too, so some of these leaves can be lower in the front of the tree to give it a little bit more of a three-dimensional effect. So really get up into that canopy of the tree. You can come up a little further than your branches. And leave some open spots. Leave place where the sky is going to come through. Don't just turn it into a big green lollipop. And gosh, while we're at it, let's take that green and go around our border a little bit. Maybe dance it over some of the yellow or what other colors you've used on the outside. And temper some of this bright purple. You could even bring some up into the tree trunk. Tone it down just a little bit. Okay, and then I would add at least one more color over the top. And what I want to do is give the leaves a little bit of a highlight. So if you're used a dark green, come in with a lighter green or a yellow. And we're going to come over some of these clumps of leaves, not all of them. And one of the things that I try and consider when I'm drawing is, where's my light source? For this drawing, the light source is coming from behind the trees. So where we're going to see the most shimmering quality of brightness is going to be around the perimeter. So where I'm going to see it most is where this light from behind is coming through. So particularly around the edges, maybe right in here. Bringing in brighter color. And find some places where those branches overlap with the other tree. And I'm also, same color, I'm going to come down along the side of the tree where there might be a little bit of light creeping around that edge. So I'm going to lighten that up a little bit, and some of the major trunks, I'm going to come in and give them a little bit of a highlight. And the ground at the base, I'm coming in and warming that up a little bit. So by now, you should have so many colors on your paper because you've overlapped so many different colors on top of other colors. Okay. Now we're going to tone it down just a bit. I'm going to bring in some brown and I'm going to keep it low. So I'm not going to integrate it into my whole border. I'm going to introduce it lower in. So it's going to come into the earth a little bit, phase out on the other side. And I can bring this brown up into the tree. Give it a little bit less of that strong, all those strong crazy colors that we began with, but allow them to come through. Don't obliterate them. Just bring in a layer of the brown. It's amazing how different they are. Yeah, it's great. It's great. Yeah, you got it. Maybe just a little bit, just a little bit more. Yeah, not much, not much. It's nice that you've got that lovely purple coming through. Lovely. Okay, so we've got two little figures that we're going to put in here, and they're going to be very small. They're dwarfed by these trees. So I'm going to make them, they're going to be right here in the middle, and first I'm just going to draw them in lightly in a white. Head, shoulders, legs. That's small, really small. Forest. One's maybe a little smaller than the other. Maybe they're holding hands as they're walking. Now, what are we going to see of them? Where's the light? It's coming from behind them, right? So they're going to be fairly dark. So I just used the white to just sketch them out, but I will then come back in and give them darker color once I've found their forms. And one of them I'm going to make female. She's going to get a little dress. Reaching out her hand. He's wearing blue slacks. And this is where I might bring in some black for their hair. Maybe their shoes. So they're pretty little. And once you've found where they are, then you can come back in and either add some white to accentuate them a little bit behind. Because really, our sky was the only place we only put in one color. So coming back in, give them a little bit more contrast. And then you can decide, do I have enough contrast? Do I want to soften my border? I can do that by putting some white overlay over some of these other colors I've put on there if it's a little too harsh. Do I want a little bit more of a highlight of light along some of my tree branches? Maybe on their shoulders, a little bit of light is cast. Light coming through the tree branches. Okay, and the other thing that I failed to do, but you should all do when you're working on a chalkboard drawing, is step back and look at it. So everybody, walk away. Walk away from yours while you're step back from your own. Look around the room. Take a gander at all the different shapes of the trees, how the foliage has been put on, color schemes. Some are very muted, others are much stronger, more dynamic. You have all imparted your own qualities to the work. Okay. Do any of you feel like you must work more on this? Brett?
Like hours.
Okay, so take 2 more minutes, and what I want you to do in
I thought you were going to talk me out of it.
No, I'll give you 2. In those 2 minutes, see if you can bring up a little bit more contrast with either adding some more darker colors or bringing in more yellow and white. And do it without compromising what you've already started. So don't start incorporating a whole new style that you weren't using before.
Is this
know in the stages instead of putting off smudging?
Yeah, so at this point, I can leave this. If I want to go back in and smudge, I have to decide, well, what do I want to smudge? Do I want it to look more painterly? Do I want to soften it? If I start smudging, I'm going to very quickly soften everything. It will become much more muted, and you have to decide, do I want to do that? Do I want it to be softer? Do I want to leave the graininess? It's up to you. You know, you can do, or you can try this. Take half of the drawing and smudge it to your heart's desire, and leave the other half alone, just so you can see what how they differ from each other. So when and if you smudge, just kind of keep intact the integrity of the form. So keep your movements in the same movement as the shapes. Okay, bing, 2 minutes, bing. So I smudged one half and I left the other half untouched. What do you think?
It's amazing the difference.
It's significant. And that's just another one of the choices you get to make. As an artist, what do you want your finished piece to look like?
Do you think there's anything pedagogically about having the more smudged with certain versus the more grainy with certain?
Well, it would seem to me that this would be more appropriate in the younger grades. You know, you've got less detail, you have softness, you have pentatonic qualities. It's more open. It doesn't have that fixed aspect that this is more inclined to have. And again, going back to Brett's drawing at the back, if you've done this and you've left, so I'll just put this in just for snicks, and you've left some black around your edges, well, obviously this is going to be a very different, you know, imagine this is just the chalkboard. This is the black chalkboard that's showing through. Distinctly different. So it's that question of what is it you want, and then various ways to achieve it. Okay? All right, let's go on. Erase your drawing, please. Bye-bye. Say bye-bye.